y'all, welcome and welcome back. My name is Morgan. If you're new here, we do all things spooky. We tell scary stories. Obviously, that's what we're doing today. I'm starting a new Appalachian folklore series this week, so I'm super stoked about that. We are talking about scary books, scary movies, my own personal experiences. It's a fun time, if I do say so myself, and if you would like to be here, I would love to have you. Down below in the description, you will find my email address, like where to send your stories and details on that. You will find my other social medias, so please check that out. And without further ado, get cozy because these are going to be some long ones. Let's get into it. So this person sent multiple stories. So we'll start with story number 1, as we should. My house is haunted, and my dad had already passed when they sold this house. You could constantly see things out of the corner of your eyes. After our beloved family dog passed away, everyone who lived there heard him bark. He had such a distinctive bark that the neighbors made us clip his vocal cords. First of all, garbage neighbors. Why? Is a dog barked? Second story from them. My husband was a complete skeptic when he moved in and left a believer. He would hear the near constant footsteps. He was running late to work and we looked everywhere for his key. After an hour, we found them on a neatly made bed. Neither of us had made that bed. That's interesting. Anyways, I'm terrified. Third story. We never tried to get rid of the ghosts, but they didn't bother us and we didn't bother them. I believe I got passerby except for one spirit who watched me grow. When I moved, my parents still lived there until their death. I went to stay the night and came to where I live now. My husband was being a smartass one night, as all men can be. And the next thing I know, he is pinned to a wall. I had to say Charlie, let him go. It was the name the medium gave me, and immediately he was dropped from the wall. Medium said that he was harmless, just protective of me. Let me know if you want more. The house I live in now has been in my husband's family for 40 years and not haunted until I got here. I believe we're dealing with a mimic as I type this. Ugh. Yes, I want them though. Yes. Alright, second story. I've decided to finally tell you the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced. Sorry if this is super long, I just want to give as much detail as possible. To give some background, I live in Southern California but travel a lot around the country. I have family in Oklahoma, so one year on Thanksgiving break, we drove to Oklahoma to celebrate with them. We left in the beginning of the week and made it to Oklahoma on Tuesday night around 11 p.m. My family's house was on a big property, around 5 acres that was surrounded by woods. I remember feeling as though someone was watching me from the trees but decided to ignore it. The next day, we were just hanging out with the family and getting ready for the big dinner. Later on in the day, all of my cousins, all 6 of them, decided to go out and hang out in the woods and mess around. I was the youngest out of the cousins, so of course I was scared and stuck to my older cousin, which was about 6 years older than I was. I was 12 at the time. It was a 30-minute drive from the house and we had to park the cars on a hiking trail lot. We walked around to a park in the woods where there was a clearing with a makeshift fire pit in the middle. We hung around the fire for around 3 hours until I decided I wanted to go back home. I was getting tired and also freaking myself out with all the stories that I heard of the woods. My older cousin decided to walk me back with just their phone flashlight. It was about a 30-minute walk to the car. After walking for around 10 minutes, we hadn't looked back and we couldn't see the fire anymore. It was a harvest moon that night, so the moon was large and bright. 5 minutes had passed, and while we were walking in comfortable silence, my cousin had noticed that the woods had gone quiet. They put their hand in front of me to stop me, and turned their head to me and lifted a finger to tell me to keep quiet. I remember getting that feeling again of being watched, and I felt my body start to shake. My cousin stood there for a couple of seconds and then whispered to me to start walking fast, but don't run, to the car as fast as I could, so I did. Once the car got into view of us, we started to jog, and then ran to the car. We got into the car and immediately locked it and started the car, but for some reason my cousin decided to sit there and wait a minute. We sat in silence, and it seemed like ages before he shifted the gear into drive and we started to move. We were only driving for around 5 minutes when we saw this creature in the middle of the road. Even thinking about this now makes my anxiety skyrocket. It was on all fours, and it wasn't like a normal 4-legged animal. It's like its limbs were too long and it stretched them to the side to keep low to the ground. It almost looked like a giant hairy spider. Its head was looking up at the woods to the right of us. We just sat there. Neither of us could move. I was frozen in fear. After what felt like ages, it turned its head towards us in a swift movement, staring. After a couple seconds, it crawled into the woods. Once it got out of sight, my cousin floored it, and the whole drive was silent. When we got to the house, we sat in the living room and decided to talk about it. My cousin had heard of these stories, of these creatures in the woods. They called it Sasquatch, tall creatures who hide. Some say they crawl to hide and run away quick. Safe to say I've never been back to Oklahoma since then. Third story. I, at the time a 7 to 8-year-old boy, was at my friend's house for 3 nights, nothing unusual. I would usually spend a whole week at my friend's house during the summer, sometimes even 2. I'm still friends with him and see him quite often and bring up this experience only with him because I know he will believe me, and we still try to figure out what happened. At the time, we both lived in my hometown in Maine. I will not disclose this for obvious reasons. We lived maybe a 10-minute drive from each other, not too bad. He had a wooded area behind his house that we would go to almost every day when I was there. We often heard weird noises like grunting, but assumed it was a deer because we would often find deer tracks after it rained. His ground would get very, very wet and sink if anything was on it. Well, this day in particular, we heard what sounded like whistling while we were playing outside on his trampoline. I should mention I live around 2 hours from the Appalachian Mountains, and at this time I did not know the rules for it, especially since I had never been to them. While we were outside, we heard what sounded like footsteps, but there was no one around but us. We both didn't think anything of it since we've had animals everywhere in his yard. But then at night when we were going inside, I swear I saw something outside of the kitchen window. It was standing at the tree line, and when I looked back, it was gone. I assumed I was seeing things and went up to go to bed. We slept in his mom's room, him in her bed and me on the couch. I went to bed almost instantly. Now would be a good time to mention that I used to wake up very early, like 6:30 in the morning without an alarm set or anything. I was just really hyper, and today was weird. I felt really tired. I laid on the couch attempting to go back to sleep. I should mention that his mom's room was right next to the door that led up to the top part of the garage where they kept some of their stuff. This will be important later. As I was about to fall back asleep, my head was fully under the covers. I was a weird kid and slept with fully under the covers. I wish I could do that. I could never do that. I stopped breathing. When I did this, I felt tapping on my pillow. 2 taps to be exact. Just tap, tap. I assumed it was my friend trying to tell me he was awake. So I threw my blanket off to get up and turn around. No one was there. I looked behind the couch and I looked under the couch, and then I thought, oh, it must have been his cat. So I looked for Bella, the cat, but couldn't find her. So I thought she must have left the room. The door was closed. When my friend did wake up, we opened the door and found Bella downstairs on the couch. I was freaked out and told him, and thankfully he believed me. I forgot about it for that day, but we went outside again, and we were going to bed. I swore I heard whistling and whispers coming from outside, and I swear that I heard a knock on his mom's door, the one to the garage that I mentioned before. My friend and I went downstairs. He didn't hear anything. His mom just said we could stay up later so that we could play Skylanders. When he went to the bathroom, I heard the whistling again, and I yelled, "Hello? Who's out there?" More whistling. I was terrified and went back inside and sat down to play and get my mind off of it. When we did go to bed, everything was normal. I asked my friend now if he remembers it, and he doesn't. The story doesn't stop there, though. When I got back to my house, I kept hearing whispers in my ear. Some I could make out as my name, and others sounded like completely made-up words. This would continue for 3 years, and I got used to it and ignored it, but refused to sleep in my room and slept on the couch. Almost a year ago, my mom left me, so I'm living with my dad right now. When I first moved in with him, we lived in Portland, Maine, and I never got those whispers ever again and felt more comfortable sleeping in my new room, especially since I got it all to myself and didn't have to share a room with my 2 younger brothers. In August, we moved back to my hometown where I'm living now. We moved so we could stay in the same school, and as I'm writing this, I'm extremely sick with a sickness that I have gotten every year since that night at my friend's. Symptoms: extreme migraines, body and muscle aches, clogged runny nose, abdominal pain, joint pain, sensitivity to heat and cold, extreme stomach aches to the point of vomiting, loss of appetite, not feeling thirsty either, blurred vision, dizziness, pain in the lungs, and trouble breathing. This did not happen when I lived in Portland, though I did have to take a couple days off from school though because I did have bad muscle aches, but that's it. I have a feeling that something sinister is in my hometown, stalking me especially since I'm hearing those whispers again and seeing the faces of people that I used to know who are now either dead or don't live with us. Also, this is the only time that it's happened since I moved into my hometown, and it's the worst out of every time it's happened. And you thought it was over? Nope. My friend and I heard weird sounds that sounded like electronic buzzing. Naturally, as stupid as 7 to 8-year-olds, we named these sounds techno sounds. My friend said these sounds were coming from a weird black humanoid creature that lived in his woods. We'd both seen this thing and heard the sounds coming from it. We heard it for years, until he moved away. This year he now lives in the next town over, next to the beach, and not much weird things happens. I kinda miss it, it was exciting. Here's an update though. I heard noises outside multiple times today, and I heard my name being called. I just ignored it like usual. I'm about to go to sleep, and I swear I saw a face out of my window. I was closing my blinds and shutters. This thing's following me. Do you have any tips on how to get rid of it? I would look up how to do banishments, but I would also cleanse your space and then put up black salt, and maybe consider getting something made of iron to put on like top of your door, on top of windows, something like that, because yeah, that's not good. That's not good. And the fact that it's like physically affecting you, not a fan. All right, next story. This story happened to me when I was in high school. I'm 42 now. I grew up on a tiny island off the coast of Seattle, Washington. The island was sacred to the First Nations people who lived there long before the island was discovered and populated by non-Indigenous folk. Many of the original non-First Nation houses still stand, well over 100 years old. The community is small, everyone knows everyone. At the time, most people didn't bother locking their doors unless they were planning on being gone for an extended period of time. So keep in mind that in this story. I wasn't given a key or anything. I went to school with a girl who we will call C in this story, and I was good friends with her. She and her family were going out of town and owned 3 dogs and had asked me if I could stay in their house to watch them for a night while they were gone. I agreed as I loved animals and was happy to help. Plus, I was a teen who wanted to make some extra pocket money. The day before they left, I went over and C gave me a tour of the house. It was an old farmhouse that they were in the process of renovating part of, so there were walls that were partially missing and tools everywhere in certain rooms. I'd been warned that the house was supposedly haunted, but having grown up around some weird happenings, I wasn't really concerned. I didn't even press for details. That's how unconcerned about it I was. After all, I'm fairly certain most people on this island would declare that their house is haunted. I didn't really get the haunted vibes from it much. So I was very much, whatever, about all of it. Well, the next day I drove over there with some groceries so I could make myself some dinner and even took a soak in their huge clawfoot bathtub that they had, which was amazing. At the end of the evening before I went to bed, I was told to put the dogs in the sunroom, kind of a big porch that someone had enclosed completely, at the back of the house, so that's where they stayed at night, with kennels, food, water, and toys. The room had a doggy door which led into a large, for the island, piece of fenced-off property at the back of the house so the dogs could potty and run. At this time, there were no natural apex predators there either, such as cougars, bears, or even coyotes, so them getting hurt by something wasn't a huge concern. Well, at this point, I can't really say that I felt weird about the place. I didn't even really think about it being haunted. If anything, it just felt a bit strange to me that it wasn't my home, and I've never been completely at ease at other people's homes until I spent considerable time in them, which I consider fairly normal. So I cleaned up my dinner mess, went to lay down in the guest bedroom, which was located off of the main dining room area. I put the dogs in the sunroom as instructed and made sure they had everything they needed. I left the guest bedroom door open so I could hear them easily if they needed anything, as we were now on opposite sides of the house from one another, myself and the dogs. Looking out of the open door, I could see the dining room, table, chairs, and the archway entry to the kitchen. At the top of this arch, there was a smoke detector with a blinking red light on it, which I just stared at, not being comfortable enough to sleep in this room I was in. I just chalked it up to me being in a strange home. The curtains of the room were drawn, so it was really dark. There wasn't any streetlights or anything outside. The only light that I could see was the red blinking light and a tiny bit of outside moonlight from the kitchen window on the other side of the archway. I can't say how long I just laid there staring at this blinking light, but it felt like forever. The dogs were quiet, as was everything. At some point, I tore my gaze from the smoke detector, bent on trying to sleep, and that's when I noticed that I didn't appear to be alone. Looking down the length of the bed, I could only describe what I saw as seeing a shadow person. But it was multiple. They were darker than the darkness around me. Human-shaped. I could make out a head, neck, shoulders, and torso. There was 3 of them. One was at the very foot of the bed, and the other 2 were standing on either side of the bed, about to where my knees or calves were under the covers. I froze. I wanted to reach over to turn on the lamp on the nightstand, but I didn't want to take my arm out of the protection of the blankets, fearful that if I did, the 3 pitch-black humanoid shapes would start to move in some way. They hadn't at this point. They were just standing there. Or worse yet, that they would try to touch me, so I remained as still as possible. I could not tell you how much time passed like this either. I just stared at them, absolutely freaked out inside of my own head and scared to move or even breathe too loudly. I remained this way until I heard the dog start to bark. I remember starting to cry quietly because I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to be where those things were, and I knew this meant that I had to turn on that lamp. I had to leave the safety of the covers, and I had to make sure the pups were okay. I took some deep breaths, and as fast as I could, I reached over for the switch of the lamp, almost knocking it off of the stand. When the light came on, there was just no one there. Nothing. I was seemingly alone, just me, the nightstand lamp, and the dresser on the far side of the room. All I could hear was my own heartbeat and the dogs. As I ran through the house to get them, I turned on every single light in that place as I went and left it on. The rooms that were under construction suddenly had a somewhat sinister feeling to me. I don't know how else to describe it, but the vibe had changed. Everything felt off. Nothing felt safe. So when I got them, I took them in with me. Me and the dog spent the night in my car. I felt slightly safer there, especially with them. But even in the car, I wasn't settled. I would open my eyes occasionally to look in the kitchen window, the one that had been on the other side of the kitchen entry/archway where the smoke detector was. Every time, all I saw was this golden glow of the kitchen light. I expected to see one of those black shapes standing there looking back at me, not that they had any facial features, but I never saw them again. I stayed this way until I got the call on my Motorola flip phone. This was the early 2000s, and I had thankfully forgotten it in the car that previous night, from C and her family saying that they were back on the island and almost home. I took the dogs back into the sunroom, made sure that they were taken care of, and entered the house once from there. I turned off the lights that had been on all night, save for one in the guest bedroom. I didn't go back in there. I didn't make the bed. I just couldn't, even with it being daylight. I gathered my things as fast as I could. Thankfully, I had left my overnight bag and purse and whatnot in the living room on the couch and not in the bedroom, and waited in the car until I saw theirs turning into the driveway. Maybe 5 minutes or less from the call. I was so tired and mentally exhausted, I just wanted to go home and actually sleep. I kind of felt uneasy talking about what had happened to me. I didn't want to acknowledge the shadow people, and I just wanted to get out of there. Still in my PJs, I told C and her family that their dogs had been angels and kind of glossed over many aspects of the night. I didn't tell them about the shadow people, or that I'd essentially napped on and off in my car with the dogs all night long. I just didn't want to go there. A part of me figured they already knew. A part of me was not wanting to explain it if they didn't. They paid me, seemingly thankful to be home again. They didn't ask why I was still in my PJs, probably just thought I was being a lazy teen, or why I'd been in my car when they arrived. Maybe they just thought I was getting something out of it. I thanked them and left, and I never went back. After that, just going past the driveway alone was enough to give me the creeps. Long after the fact that I did wind up telling C about my experience, who said that she had experienced similar happenings. Honestly, I'm not sure if that realization made me feel any better, though. I've thought about this instance many times over the years. It could have been sleep paralysis, I suppose, but I don't recall being unable to move, just that I was scared to. And if I was asleep, I found it interesting that C and I shared similar experiences. After the renovations were complete, they sold the house. I can't say I blame them, though. I don't think its haunted status honestly had anything to do with them doing so, but maybe it did, who knows. As soon as I moved off the island, the various weird things that happened to me on a fairly regular basis stopped. If you'd care to know more, I would be happy to share. Just let me know. Yes. It was one of the... That was one of my favorite stories, I think, that I've been sent to date. It was so well written and just so much detail. I loved that story. And it made time fly here. I loved that. Anyways, that is all for this video. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me on this fairly longer video. And I hope you like the longer videos because we're going to keep doing it. But I will see you tomorrow.